Welcome to the Brain Injury Association of New York State's webinar, So You Want to Be an Advocate, New York State Legislature. This is the third presentation in our three-part advocacy series. I am Carla Giovaniello, Brain Injury Training and Services Project Director here at the Association. Thank you for joining us. Before we begin, a few housekeeping details. Because of limited time, we ask that you please hold your questions until the end of the presentation. During the question and answer session, questions can be submitted via the question text box. The text box option should be visible to you on your GoToWebinar toolbar on your desktop. If you are having trouble viewing this option, please contact Citrix Tech Support at 1-800-263-6317. Again, that number is 1-800-263-6317. This number should also be visible on your toolbar. Our speaker will do her best to answer questions in the order that they are received. Any questions that she is unable to address may be submitted via email to the association. We will be recording this webinar session and plan to post it, along with the PowerPoint slides, to our website, www.BIANYS.org. Information about contacting the association and viewing the webinar will also be provided in a follow-up email after the presentation has concluded. My contact information will also be included in those follow-up messages. Before I turn the microphone over to Marian, let us begin with a quick poll to see who is in our audience today. I'm going to launch the poll. Please take a moment to answer the question. Give you about 5 more seconds. All right, I'm going to close the poll and share the results. All right, so it looks like 42% answered that they are a healthcare professional or provider. 42% answered that he or she is a brain injury service provider, and 17% answered other. I am always curious to know who is in that other category. So if you would like, if you're interested, if you want to type in that chat section what you do, I would love to see so that I can tailor my questions. Thank you. It looks like we do have some variety in our audience. That's always wonderful. As an organizer, it truly is a privilege to be part of the planning process. And I do want to thank you all again for your participation and for helping to spread the word about our monthly webinars. I'm going to close that poll now and hide it. And it is with sincere pleasure that I introduce our webinar presenter for today, Ann McLean. Marian is an attorney specializing in government relations. She was counsel to the New York State Senate Higher Education Committee for 8 years following law school, and then in 1987 she became a lobbyist. Since that time, she has represented numerous clients, including colleges, professional associations, and commercial businesses. Marian, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. The purpose of today's presentation is to familiarize you with being an advocate in New York State government so that you'll either feel more comfortable engaging in something you've done before, or hopefully to encourage some of you to try this for the first time. Also included are a number of resources that I hope will help you as you go through this. Next. So let's start with the basics. What is an advocate? Well, according to Webster's dictionary, it is one that pleads the cause of another. And of course, over the term of your life, sometimes you can be an advocate for your own cause. Next. I want to flip the order of what is normally, what is the normal order of things for a how to lobby presentation. I'm going to focus first on why you should do this, or in other words, why is it important? And then we're going to cover what you should say and how you should do that. And we'll conclude with a description of your potential audience. That audience, of course, could be, for these purposes, the governor, one of the agencies, or more likely members of the state legislature. And we'll go into more depth about that audience later. Next. First, let's do a poll question to gauge who is participating today. Carla?
All right, I'm going to launch that poll now. The question is, I have met with a government official to discuss an issue of concern, true or false. Please take a moment to answer the question. I'll give you about 5 more seconds to answer. All right, I'm going to close the poll now and share the results.
Okay. All right, interesting.
Can you see the results, Marian?
Yeah, half of the people, a little over half of the people have done this, so that's good to know, and hopefully if they have any questions related to a past experience, they'll come forward with them. Next. So as I said, I want to begin by focusing on why you're participating in this webinar. Otherwise, a lot of this just looks like another lesson in government. I want to cover the various aspects of advocacy. Why should you be an advocate? It might be very different than what you normally do, and as such, it may make you feel uncomfortable. But as with most activities, the more you know about it and understand it, the easier it'll be. The purpose of advocacy is to inform. You have a story to tell, and I want you to feel more comfortable telling that story. And officials in government need to hear it. Without you, they may never be exposed to your side of the story. And you may be the best messenger for that position. There's no substitute for personal knowledge and experience on a particular issue. And you should always use that passion when you engage in this. Lastly, you should try to find groups that share your position, since a larger group can often be more effective. Next. Once you know why you want to step forward, let's focus on what comes next, which is, of course, the message. Obviously, there are several methods of getting your message out there, so let's consider the range of communication tools. First, of course, there's meetings, which is certainly the most preferred since it's very direct and personal. Then there are phone calls. But calling is difficult since the call is usually too brief. It may be interrupted, so it's not really the most effective form of communication, especially if it's your first outreach. With emails and letters, and understand that in some settings, emails have definitely become the preferred method between the two, but I found that these two formats have different impacts in different offices, and I've even found among different people within the same office prefer one or the other. Just so that you know, most offices in the legislature now dedicate someone to collecting and responding to emails, although depending on the volume of emails at any given time, particularly when there's an upsurge in controversial issues, emails can get lost, which is the downside. They're just overwhelmed by them, and they don't see them. So in my feeling is that letters are more permanent. And then, of course, there are faxes, which is just another form of a letter. But again, they can be easily missed depending on where the actual fax machine is located. In a number of offices, it's sort of tucked in the back. So I've seen things where faxes have fallen on the floor or people have completely forgotten about them. So there are many ways of of communicating, and each has its own positives and negatives. Next. So regardless of the method of communicating to government officials, there are, of course, a number of things that you want to remember. First and foremost, do your homework. You want to figure out who you need to convince, and one of those entities might be legislators, as I've mentioned, so you might want to figure out who your senator or assembly person is, and we'll get into how to do that later on. And you want to determine what you want to convey. More succinctly, what do you want? Then you want to explain your position, but of course keep it brief. In fact, I recommend practicing, if you haven't done this before and you're not comfortable, it will ease that sense of possible anxiety. And one thing I want to remind you, whether you're doing a letter or a meeting, assume nothing on the part of the person that you're either meeting with or writing to. Don't use technical terms or jargon, and worst of all, don't use acronyms. Remember, these officials deal with hundreds of issues, and in certain settings like the legislature, they run from transportation, education, crimes, insurance, banking, as well as healthcare. And they really can't obviously be expected to know a lot about what you want to discuss before they meet with you or take a letter from you. And that's why you're there. If you're doing a meeting with others, decide in advance who will cover each topic. It again reduces that sort of sense of anxiety so that people aren't talking over each other. And recognize that a meeting, it lasts about 15 to 20 minutes. If possible, personalize your meeting or letter with an anecdote, something that actually happened to you or that you know about from personal experience. These comments are most likely to be remembered the longest, and they resonate better with your listener or reader. Then be prepared to answer questions that they may have, but I should say also don't be surprised if they don't ask questions. Again, there's an awful lot going on in their lives too, and in their business day, so they may just be taking in the information. But if they ask you a question and you don't know the answer, say, I'll get back to you on that, since of course you never want to give out incorrect information. It's a great idea to take the time and prepare a fact sheet, something succinct, that includes your bill number, the specific budget issue or regulation. This, in addition to making it easier for the person you're meeting with, and again, even in a letter, the reader, it gives them the correct information in a succinct fashion, and also for the purposes of meetings, it gives you that important leave behind, which is something that you want to use to memorialize the meeting and to make sure that they got all the information accurately. And then you want to make an ask, something like, we'd like your support, or we'd like you to oppose a certain bill. We'd like you to become a sponsor of this bill in the legislature. We'd like you to write a letter to the Speaker or the Assembly, the Speaker of the Assembly or the Majority Leader of the Senate. Those sorts of things get them engaged so that your meeting is a little differentiated from a lot of the other meetings where people don't do that. But again, be mindful that they're probably not going to commit right on the spot. But I want you to follow up and tell them you're going to follow up, and that can be the thing you follow up about. So if you do a meeting in Albany, you could visit the district office or vice versa, or you can at least make a call to follow up. And then, of course, always say thank you. Since there are tremendous time constraints on these officials, you want them to remember that it was a good experience meeting with you. Just another few tips. If you're going to do an Albany Lobby Day, it can be crazy. On Tuesdays when most of the other groups come. So don't worry if it seems hectic and you know, we worry whether or not it was worth it. It's definitely worth it because I can assure you that if it's a controversial issue, assume that your opponents are going to be there. So I highly recommend doing those Albany visits as well. Next. And again, remember your audience. Elected officials really do care what their constituents think. They can't get reelected without voter support. Try to get to know them. They're usually very active in their communities, and your message will have more impact if they see you more than once and they see you as active on a particular issue. Also, just remember they know you all have neighbors that you'll talk to if they help you. And again, as I said earlier, they may have no other way to get this important information, and that's why they need to hear from you. I wanted to give a specific example of how this process works in a recent setting, that is the importance of communicating with the legislature and why they want to learn. In 2011, the legislature passed the Concussion Management and Awareness Act. Clearly the problem of concussions had existed for a long time, but new articles began to, news articles began to proliferate, and they were seeing those. And then, fortunately, a number of interest groups emerged with a similar goal. So some of those were the Brain Injury Association, the National Football League, the Athletic Trainers Association, school districts, and others. And all the groups got together. They brought a different perspective and knowledge base. The legislature listened. They learned what they had to do. And legislation was negotiated for several months, and it was passed and signed into law by the governor in September of 2011. So it was a great outcome for all of those advocates. Next. So now that you know why you should be an advocate and how to convey that message, let's go over some details about your audience. Who are they and what do they do? Next. As you know, there are three branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary, or the courts. As advocates, you may need to contact either the executive or the legislative branch, or both. And I'm going to briefly describe these two branches. First is the executive, popularly known as the governor. The governor begins the legislative year by delivering a State of the State message. This annual address sets forth policy goals, his policy goals for the coming year. And Governor Cuomo gave his State of the State message on January 5th. There was a lot of media coverage, especially focused on his gun control proposal, which he then successfully negotiated with both houses of the legislature, and in nearly record time it was passed. You could say that Governor Cuomo is a very effective advocate. He is passionate, he made his case, and he certainly knew his audience. Next. This is an aerial photo of the Empire State Plaza. Although most of the buildings that you see, those four buildings in line and the building right behind it, house most of the state agencies. Next. These agencies are under the governor's control that I just described. New York has over 100 agencies, and this shows a listing of some of them, and there's a link so that you can see the full list. Each is charged with some or all of the following responsibilities: enforcing laws, implementing programs, creating new programs, and then they promulgate all the relevant regulations for these programs. Among the numerous agencies in New York, you'll need to identify the ones that are responsible for your issue area. Next. So you want to understand that your lead, once you've determined which agency you need to deal with, that they will be a key player in your issue. You want to keep the agency informed of any advocacy effort, and you want to seek their support or at least a neutral position on that issue. Understanding that you can help agency staff reach a goal they may otherwise be unable to achieve, whether due to lack of in-house resources, so that you can sort of fill that gap, or sometimes they can't make waves. They're taking a consistent position perhaps with past positions, but you know, they may really want to make the change that you do. So you can create the pressure to change that policy to your advantage. But of course, you always want to remember that long-term relationships with the agency personnel is important to being effective. I've listed some examples of state agencies related to brain injury, just so that you can see there are many involved in every issue. Next. These are some resources, again, more things for you to look at later on. The Department of State, one of the state agencies, publishes all agency regulations, and I've included the link at the top there for current regulations. And I'm going to go to the next slide, and then I'll refer back to the rest of this slide. So if you'd go to the next. This shows, this is a link or a screenshot of the page that you can get to that can bring up all current regulations affecting every issue area that is involved in New York State government. At the bottom of the previous page, I gave you a link to the weekly publication known as the State, oh thanks Carl, to the State Register for all proposed regulations. And it's important to know that by law, all proposed regulations must be published, and they have to solicit comments from the public. And then these comments must then be reviewed, and the responses to every comment are also published in the Register. So when there's a pending regulation, you can get a lot of information from that State Register. Next. In addition to the work of the state agencies, the governor also has authority over the entity responsible for developing and implementing the state budget. This organization is known as the Division of Budget. This is a photo of the recent, the front cover of the governor's most recent budget proposal, which he delivered on January 22nd. And just to give you some perspective on the enormity of the business of running New York State, our state's current budget totals well over $100 billion. So it's a big deal. Next. We're going to do another poll question, Carla.
Yep, I'm going to launch this poll. The next question that we're going to do right now is, are you familiar with the budget execution process, yes or no? I'm going to launch it now. Please take a moment to answer the question. Give you about 5 more seconds to answer. All right, I'm going to close the poll and share the results.
Oh. Okay, I'm glad this is in here.
All right, I'm going to hide that now for you, Marianne.
Okay. So, next. As you can see from this graphic, there are 4 steps to the annual budget process. In the first one, the orange section there, between June and September or October, each of the agencies prepares their annual plan, and it sets forth their goals and the funds that they believe are necessary to implement those goals. So if you have a new idea, or if you want to make recommendations for existing programs, this is when you should be talking to the appropriate agency so they can have the benefit of your expertise when they make their request. So this is an annual, again, by this graphic you can see that this is all year long. This is something is happening with respect to the budget process. Then in the next segment, in the green part, between between September and October through December, the Division of Budget that we commonly know as DOB reviews all of those agency plans and the requests, and they develop the statewide executive budget proposal. So there are subject matter experts or individuals charged with each of the agency issues. So there are people doing environmental issues, people doing healthcare, people doing education, insurance, and all those topics. There are full-time budget people who interact on a regular basis with the agencies, and you know, they have a dialogue, an ongoing dialogue about how a particular program is going, whether it should be expanded or ended. You know, so there are these ongoing discussions. So the plans come in during the fall, and they assess the value of all these requests, but they have the responsibility of meeting with their colleagues who have all of those other issues. So it's the big picture. They're sort of doing the big picture ultimately, and they also have to wrestle with the issues of whether there's revenue to pay for those requests. So they may think it's a great idea, but if revenues are down, or if there's a need in one area that sort of sucks the revenue off that has to be sucked off some other program, then those are the decisions that they're making during the fall. Then in the next segment, you see in January, the governor presents that proposal to the legislature, and that was the photo in the previous slide showing the book that has the full description of the budget. And then in the last one there, between January and March, the legislature reviews the proposal, which that book that you saw is hundreds of pages long. And then each of the issues contained within that budget is put into statutory budget language, and those are the many budget bills that are submitted also. Then, during that time, the two houses hold joint hearings on all the subject areas, and each house compiles its own one-house budget as a negotiating tool, and like the governor, they each focus on their separate priorities. And then in a final set of bills, after they've done that negotiation, they agree to make changes to the governor's budget where they deem necessary, and then they pass revised budget bills. So during this period of time is another entry point that advocates can make their case to anything relating to budgetary issues. So New York's fiscal year begins on April 1st, unlike a lot of states that begin on July 1st, but New York's begins on April 1st, so therefore the legislature is supposed to complete this process by March 31st. And for those of you who have followed New York government, they have often missed that deadline over the last couple of decades. But this year, they have been on time for the last couple of years. But this year, due to the fact that Passover and Easter holidays are a little early, the legislature announced that they will pass the budget by March 21st, which is, of course, 10 days early. A lot of people have doubt as to whether that will actually happen. Of course, it's always good to have early as a goal, but time will tell. Next. So now I will conclude the audience portion with the entity that most of you will be dealing with, which is the legislature. And New York, of course, has two houses, the Senate and the Assembly. And this is a photo of the Legislative Office Building, which houses most of those legislators' offices. There is spillover, if you will, into the Capitol, which you can see right on the corner there. It's across the street. And whereas most of the legislators had their offices years and years ago in the Capitol, now most of them are located in this Legislative Office Building, also known as the LOB, and it can get quite busy on, as I say, a typical lobby day. Next. So the process for passing a bill is shown on this slide in what may be, to many of you, a familiar flowchart. Starts, of course, with somebody having an idea. That idea is put into statutory language by a full team of individuals who draft bills, and that entity is logically known as the Bill Drafting Commission. Then it gets introduced as a bill with its own bill number in each house. And bills are live for 2 years. And if a bill hasn't been enacted into law, it dies at the end of those 2 years, and it has to be reintroduced again. Many bills are reintroduced year after session after session after session. So there are many bills in the legislature right now that have been around for 20 and sometimes 30 years. There are 20,000 bills. Again, just to give you some perspective, 20,000 bills are introduced approximately over every 2-year session. And interestingly, almost the same number are signed into law every year. There's 700 to 800 are signed into law every year. And then, as I say, after the 2-year period, all those bills that weren't are typically reintroduced. Sometimes people give up, but most do get reintroduced. So then the next box there says committee action, and so it gets referred to the relevant committee. Each committee has jurisdiction over certain laws that are applicable to their issue area, and then the committee chairs choose the bills that will appear on their agendas, their committee agendas. Many committees meet every week. The smaller committees meet every other week, and there's even some committees that only meet periodically. The Senate, just so that you know, has 33 standing committees, so every member is on many committees. The Assembly has 37 standing committees, and again, members are on a few each. And if a bill passes out of committee, the next thing you see there is the calendar. So the bill goes to the floor, and it is put on the calendar, but not necessarily debated right away. Not many bills are debated right away, and it has to wait to be chosen to be on an active list for it to be taken up for debate. However, nowadays not many bills are debated. By the time it gets to the floor of either the Senate or the Assembly, it's likely going to pass, and that's when the full House votes. And so we went through the debate. Then if the bill passes, then just so that you know, the entire process is repeated in the other House. So all of these steps are required to occur in both houses because the exact same bill is what ultimately goes to the governor. So there's only a bill that has gone through both houses is then sent on to the governor. But again, just so that you know, oftentimes the bills will go through the two-house process simultaneously. And then lastly, the governor, once the identical bill is passed in both houses, it goes to the governor, and he decides whether to sign it into law or to veto it. Next. The most effective advocate is often someone who is a constituent, someone who lives in that legislator's Senate district or Assembly district. And these are useful links, hopefully, to help you identify your local legislators. Again, just as an aside, when you go to these links, they are not identical. They don't have the same format in both houses. But when you go to the Senate link, you're going to look for click here to find my senator. And in the Assembly, you're going to look for click here to search by address. So you'll see them on there, but that's the way to identify your local legislator. And I just thought I'd provide pictures for you of the two chambers. On the left is the Senate, the upper house, and on the right is the Assembly. And the chambers are beautiful, and I recommend that if you get to Albany, you should take the opportunity to observe the sessions from the galleries that are afforded to the public in both houses. Also, I think if you, when you go to the web page, when you discover who your legislator is, or for that matter, any legislator that you're going to meet with, I recommend going to their individual website. Each of the legislators has his or her own website, and take a look at their biography. That's one of the options listed. And clearly that will tell you what's important to that person and what issues they're proud to be associated with. And ideally, it could help you find a point of common interest, and that always helps you as an advocate. Next. Again, a couple little side points here. Session goes from January until the end of June. This year scheduled to end on June 20th. And the legislators are in Albany from Monday through Wednesday, typically, and they go back to their districts Thursday and Friday during that 6-month period. Next. And I've given you the actual calendar is to help you as a reference. If you plan to see a legislator, it will help you know if they're going to be in Albany or their district. But of course, you know, intervening things occur, and sometimes they'll stay in Albany an extra day, but you're going to be scheduling any appointment that you make. So this just gives you a guide as to where they're probably going to be. Next. Quickly on the two houses, as you know, last November there were elections, and every member, every seat in both houses goes up for re-election, or if it's an open seat, goes for election every other year. So in the Assembly, they added 5 more Democrats, so the margin is 107 Democrats and 43 Republicans for 150 total. And Sheldon Silver, a Democrat from Manhattan, remains the Speaker. He's been the Speaker since 1994. And in preparing for this talk, I did a little looking to see, it seemed to me that there had been tremendous turnover in the relative recent past, and I certainly was surprised to learn that there have been 107 new members elected since the year 2000, and that the House only has 150 seats. So, more than that, only 7 Assembly members were elected in 1980 or earlier. Sheldon Silver being one of them. 55 have been elected since the year 2011, and that's a third of the whole House since 2011. And in fact, 23 members newly elected just in November. So this is an extraordinary level of turnover in a state that doesn't have term limits. And just what's the impact of that? It's both good and bad. You have new blood and hopefully lots of new enthusiasm, but you have to weigh that against the loss of institutional memory and expertise. So it is what it is, but I think that's just something interesting to note. Next. The Senate has seen historic change, but for a very different kind. A new Senate seat was created following the redistricting process that occurs after each federal census is done. The new seat is located in the Albany area. The last time they added seats was after the 1990 census, and they added 2 seats. There were more tight races in the Senate in the last election than there were in the Assembly. And after the election, several seats were contested and recounts occurred. But the conclusion, as you can see, was 33 Democrats, 30 Republicans for the new total of 63. So while it would appear that the Democrats would be in control, that didn't happen. The first thing that happened was one of the newly elected Democrats election that he'd rather work with the Republicans. And in fact, he sits in their private party conference sessions, which are usually for Republicans only. And then the Independent Democratic Conference, or the IDC, which was formed after the 2010 election, still exists. So they are a group of Democratic senators who frequently vote with the Republicans. They have in the last 2 years. And they gained a new member this year. One of the other Democrats moved over into their Independent Democratic Conference. So now they're a group of 5. And they did not want to vote for a Democrat to have a Democratic leader. Instead, they negotiated with the Republican leadership shortly after the November elections, and they formed with the Republicans the Senate Majority Coalition. So for the first time in history, we have true coalition government in New York. Next. The newly formed Senate Majority Coalition will share leadership between Dean Skelos, from a Republican from Nassau County, and Jeff Klein, a Democrat from the Bronx, who also represents part of Westchester. Their formal agreement, which is set forth in the recently adopted Senate rules, says they will have joint and equal authority. Remember, one has 5 people in it and the other has 30, but again, they have equal, or 33, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I take that back. It was 30 Republicans and 5 of the IDC. So they're going to jointly have authority over the daily Senate calendar, which was in that chart of how a bill becomes a law. Remember, I said bills get to the calendar, but they don't necessarily get voted on right away. And so they are bills that are chosen to be voted on will have to be as an agreement between between Skelos and Klein. They are working jointly on, have equal say over the state budget, so that decisions about what the Senate will support in their one-house budget bills will be shared by Skelos and Klein. And they will also share and have to agree on appointments to state and local boards. And then they also agreed on leadership and committee assignments for their conferences. Most unusually, they agreed to alternate as the temporary president of the Senate, which is the highest post in the Senate. It's the equivalent of the Speaker in the other House. So these process changes are likely to have a huge impact on what gets done or what doesn't get done going forward. And by that, I mean controversial issues like gun control, which they did already, and there's a lot of consternation in both sides over how that happened. Increasing the minimum wage and other issues will be subject to a very different process than New York has ever had before. But remember that the coalition has only been in place for several weeks, so it remains to be seen how it will work, how well it will work. But people who work in Albany or who work with government, I can assure you, will be watching it very closely. So for my final slide, which I'll ask for in a second, I thought I would show you one more photo that might perhaps help induce you to begin becoming an advocate in Albany. Next. This is a picture of the newly refurbished $1 million staircase in the Capitol. It is truly nothing short of spectacular, and I highly recommend seeing it. So again, if you get to the Capitol and you hopefully will sit in and observe the session through the galleries, this is in the middle of the, it's actually in the center of the Capitol, so that the Senate chamber and the Assembly chamber are on opposite sides. And this is a beautiful, there's carvings, and it's just really, and there's a skylight above. That's where you're seeing a lot of the natural light. We often sarcastically say in Albany about a lot of high-cost government projects that it's your tax dollars at work. But I think when it comes to the incredibly restored Capitol, it really is worth it. And this governor has chosen to display a number of very historic, valuable artifacts from New York's history. So with great explanations with all of them. So I think it's sort of restored it to somewhat of a museum in addition to being a working Capitol. So with that, I thank you, and I would be happy to take any questions.
All right, we will begin the question and answer session now. Like was mentioned in the beginning, in my introduction, you should see a question text box on your toolbar. Please feel free to type your questions in. We'll take them as they come. I do have one individual who wants us to go back to, it says the slide with the Senator and Congressman links. Let's see. I'm not sure if she wants the
I think before, yeah, that one.
Okay. Again, these slides will be available for download. We will be posting them on our website, www.BIANYS.org. And if you stick around, I'll actually show you where our webinar recordings are displayed on our website. Anyone has a question, please feel free to type it in that question text box. All right, while I'm waiting for questions, I am going to give a few quick reminders before we conclude the webinar. And then as I receive questions, I will address them. Oops. Did not want to click the link. All right, well, while we're here, I will show everyone how to access our recordings and our presentation slides. If you visit our website, our webpage, BIANYS.org, on this toolbar here, you'll see on the side it says resources. you're going to want to click Resources or hover over it, and then you'll see an option for Webinars. You're going to click that. This is what our webinars page looks like. We include all of our past webinar recordings on this page, and the PowerPoint slides or whatever handouts were made available during the presentation as well. If you did not, for some reason, you were not able to participate in one of the first two of the advocacy series, please feel free to visit this page and you'll find the other two on here. It looks like we do have some questions. Let me take us back here. All right. One of the first questions I received, Marian, is how do you identify which part of the governor's staff oversees a particular executive branch agency?
I think it's, you can go to, on that, in the agency listing there, I think it's better, it's an interesting question that you asked because I have some issues myself where the staffing does, there is some turnover or they move from an issue to another. So it's probably better, well, one way you can do it is to go to the agency and ask someone at the agency who deals with this in the Division of Budget, or you can just call the general Division of Budget number, which I believe we gave a budget link, and tell the person who answers the phone what you want to talk to, what issue you want to talk to someone about, and they will refer you to the correct person. Because again, there's no listing per se because they do have turnover.
All right, another question I received from the audience is, what is the process for getting in to see a senator or assembly member?
Again, it's a simple phone call. They are very accustomed to complete strangers calling and asking for a meeting. It's easier to do a meeting in the district office, so once you find out who you want to meet with, then when you go to their web page, their address is also there, and you just call. But if you want to come to Albany, that phone number is available too. So there's addresses and phone numbers for each legislator on their web page, and you just make a call and you'll be asked, and using that calendar, it'll give you a sense. You don't want to call and ask for a Friday meeting in Albany because they're not likely to be there. So you can use that calendar to gauge where you should be trying to get your meeting, and just tell them that you want to come in, and they will usually ask you what you want to talk about. That you don't have to be very specific. And again, if you are a constituent, put that in your request. You say that I'm a constituent of Senator or Assemblyperson so-and-so, and I would like to come in to discuss, and you can be, again, very general in the topic that you give.
All right, I do have two questions that are focusing on what the Brain Injury Association of New York State is doing. I am unfortunately not the most knowledgeable person on this, but I can tell you some of the stuff that we're doing. One of them has to do with when does BIANYS go to Albany. We're actually located in Albany, and we do attend a lot of events. We actually are planning a virtual brain injury awareness day too, which you can find out information about that on our webpage. Again, it's www.bianys.org. If you would like any more information on how we're currently involved, we definitely encourage you to send an email, and I will make sure that we get a response out to you. Do we have any other questions? All right, I do have one more question. Which agency would you go to if they overlap more than one? For instance, for brain injury, Department of Health versus Human Rights or Developmental Disabilities?
That's a question? Carla?
Yep, I'm here, Marian.
That was a question?
Yes, that was a question. Which agency would you go to if they overlap?
Both, because you don't know, if it's not something that if you try one, they'll tell you if it's not them. But I would never risk going only to the wrong one, or avoiding, I should say, or avoiding one that might have jurisdiction. They're not likely to tell you that they share jurisdiction with someone. So in that case, you'd want to make sure you hit both. But if they have no jurisdiction or interest in the issue, they will probably, I assume, they would tell you that. So I would approach several if it's possible that there's that much overlap, just to make sure that you do engage everyone who's dealing with your subject area.
We still have some time. While we're waiting for additional questions, I'm just going to flip through some of our end slides, a little bit about the association. As many of you may know, we are a statewide nonprofit membership organization. We advocate on behalf of individuals with brain injuries and their families. This is our contact information if you're interested in emailing us. You can email me personally. Again, you will be receiving that information in a follow-up email. So keep that in mind if you have a question that, again, wasn't addressed or wasn't answered. Please, I encourage you to send the questions to me, and I will make sure they get to Marianne. It looks like we do have one more question here. If you are advocating for someone, is it wise to introduce them in person?
In other words, bring that individual to the meeting?
I think so. I think, yes, that is what the individual is asking. Should you bring that person with you?
They are accustomed, these legislators and agency people, they are accustomed to having people included of all, with all kinds of issues or stories. But I think it more depends on the comfort level of the individual that you are talking, who you are advocating for, as to whether they feel comfortable with that level of exposure. But again, I wouldn't, if they are comfortable doing it, the legislature is more than familiar with that kind of situation.
I agree. I think that's a great answer, Marian. And just from my personal experience, I was in D.C. last year, and I went with some individuals who sustained brain injuries, and they shared their story and their struggles and what they were looking for and what they needed. And I think that speaks volumes. I think it does a lot more, and they can show a lot more than I can personally, speaking on behalf. So if they are comfortable with it, if he or she is comfortable with attending, I do think that it can really do a great justice to them as well.
Right, and that sort of is echoes the comment that I made about personalizing and providing anecdotal evidence of any particular situation, and certainly a human being is as great an anecdote as there is.
All right, while we're waiting for more questions, I do want to share some of our upcoming webinars, some information about them. We do have one scheduled for Friday. We're very busy this month. It Takes a Village, REAP. It's a community-based concussion management protocol. That webinar will actually show participants the importance of the multidisciplinary team approach to concussion management, how to best implement a concussion management protocol in a school district setting, and ideas for return to learning. It will be presented by Dr. Karen McAvoy, who is actually the author of the multidisciplinary team approach to concussion management known as REAP. New York State did actually create an adaptation of that booklet. REAP stands for Reduce, Educate, Accommodate, and Pace. So that will be this Friday, 1 p.m. to 2:15 p.m. We are also offering 2 webinars in March. One is a webinar training, Understanding Life with Brain Injury Training. That is on the 14th. That will be a 2-hour webinar only because we are trying to fit in a training that we normally deliver in person. So we're trying to branch out. The purpose of the Understanding Life with Brain Injury webinar training is to improve the quality of services provided to individuals with traumatic brain injuries, to discuss causes and results of brain injury, describe the challenges of living with a brain injury, and provide communication tools as well as promoting job satisfaction for direct care staff who work with individuals who have traumatic brain injuries. It will be presented by the association's own executive director, Judith Abner. So if that seems applicable to you, if you're interested, we will have information about registering for that as well as the REAP webinar on our website. And the second webinar I mentioned that will be offered in March is at the end of March, the 27th. This is a webinar we're bringing back by popular demand. It's Return to Learn, supporting students returning to the classroom post-concussion. This will be presented by Dr. Brian Rieger. He is the Chief Rehabilitation Psychologist and Director of the Concussion Management Program at Upstate Sports Concussion Center at SUNY Upstate Medical University in Syracuse, New York. The webinar will provide information about concussion management and how to best aid students in their return to the classroom post-concussion. If you're interested, again, we will be posting information about these and how to register. If you are on our webinar email list, you will also receive the electronic flyers, so you can register that way. I do have a question here from the audience. Can you comment on specific accommodations requested at the higher education level? I'm not sure. Is that pertaining to the scheduled webinar? I'm not sure. That might be one you would want to email to me. Let's see. That looks like a question that might be best if you emailed it to me, and I will try to get you an answer on that. But thank you for asking. If you like the webinar, like us on Facebook, please follow us. We like the attention and we love the support. So thank you so much. It doesn't look like we have any other questions at this time. Marian, thank you again so much. It was great having you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you for being here, and thank you everyone for participating. Please keep sharing information about our webinars and visit our website for more information. All right, everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you again, Marianne. Thank you all for joining. Have a wonderful day.